The hangar was so cold the air seemed to hum. Breath turned to mist as rows of uniforms stood at rigid attention beneath the steel rafters. Boots aligned, rifles slung, eyes fixed forward. It was supposed to be a routine inspection until Captain Harkin's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He was the kind of man who'd built his career on volume. His chest outpaced his medals. His temper outpaced his rank. "Lieutenant Cole," he barked, pacing between the lines. "Care to explain why you decided to speak over me during the briefing?" His tone dripped with accusation, but Cole didn't flinch. She'd been still through gunfire, storms, and hell weeks. The noise of a man's ego didn't register as threat. Her silence irritated him. "Answer me when I speak to you, Lieutenant," he snapped, stepping close enough for his breath to fog against her cheek. She finally met his gaze, steady, calm, unreadable. Something in that composure infuriated him further. "You think you're untouchable because of that trident?" The words carried more venom than question. Before anyone could react, his hand lashed out. The sound, flesh on flesh, sharp and final, cracked across the hangar. Every soldier froze. Time itself seemed to recoil. Cole's head snapped slightly with the blow, but she didn't fall. She didn't even raise a hand. Blood welled faintly along her lip. Her gaze, however, never left his. That was what unsettled him most. Not defiance, not fear, but stillness. The kind that doesn't submit or retaliate, only measures. The platoon's eyes darted between them, unsure whether to breathe or brace. Harkins shifted, realizing too late that his outburst had exposed something raw, not her weakness, but his own. And in that unbearable silence, every man in the room understood something had shifted. She hadn't lost control. She'd taken it. The cold on her cheek was nothing compared to the kind that had once lived in her bones. Years before the slap, long before the rank, there had been nights when Rena Cole floated face down in black water off Coronado, her arms trembling against the tide, the Pacific clawing at her resolve. Instructors shouted until their voices broke, promising to drown her if she quit. She didn't answer then either. Silence had been her weapon even back in BUD/S, a language the sea understood. While others cursed or begged for warmth, she listened to the rhythm of the surf and matched her heartbeat to it. Each wave taught her patience, each insult, endurance. She learned that strength wasn't about striking first. It was about knowing exactly when not to. There had been moments when her body failed her, when salt water burned her lungs and her vision dimmed. In those seconds between life and surrender, she found the calm she would later wear like armor. Instructors called her a ghost because she moved without emotion, followed orders without noise. But they never saw the calculation beneath that calm. Every movement measured, every breath rationed for survival. When she finished Hell Week, she didn't celebrate. She just sat on the sand until sunrise, staring at the ocean that had tried to erase her. The others saw exhaustion. She felt clarity. That silence wasn't emptiness. It was control, earned in freezing surf and sleepless nights. So when Captain Harkin's hand met her jaw, her body remembered colder pain and louder men. She stood in that hangar like she had in the water, still, breathing slow, waiting for the storm to spend itself. Her jaw throbbed, swelling under the fluorescent light, but her focus never wavered. Around her, boots scraped, hearts pounded, and yet she remained the eye of a hurricane she didn't start. They tried to teach her obedience years ago. What they created instead was composure sharpened into something unbreakable. And as Harkins glared at her, realizing the force of his blow had done nothing, she knew he'd never understand the quiet places where strength is born. The moment passed, but the air didn't loosen. Captain Harkins straightened his shoulders, searching for a way to reclaim the authority that had slipped through his fingers. "Lieutenant," he barked, his voice cracking just slightly. "Stand down and report to quarters." She didn't argue, didn't salute, just gave the smallest nod, turned, and began walking toward the hangar doors. Each step echoed across the concrete like the ticking of a clock. No one dared speak. Even Harkin's breathing sounded too loud. Her exit wasn't defiance. It was precision, controlled withdrawal, the kind that makes witnesses wonder who really gave the order. The heavy doors shut behind her, and with them, the room exhaled. That night, while the base went quiet under desert wind, Harkins sat in his office staring at the reflection of that moment. The strike, the stillness, the eyes that didn't break. He poured himself a drink to drown the thought that maybe he'd gone too far. But before the glass reached his lips, a message came through his comms. Captain Harkins, you've been requested for an evaluation spar. 0600, base gym. He chuckled, shaking his head. An evaluation? Over what discipline? He dismissed it until his door opened and the Master Chief stepped in. The older man's voice was low, heavy with the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. You hit one of ours, he said flatly. You owe her that courtesy. Harkins froze, the glass trembling just slightly. She requested it, he asked. The chief met his eyes. No, I did. The next morning, the gym smelled of sweat, rubber, and silence. The word had spread. Ranks lined the walls, not cheering, not speaking, observing. Harkins tightened his gloves, smirking at the absurdity of it all. He'd boxed before. He'd been in fights. Whatever this was, it would be over quickly. Then the doors opened. Cole stepped through, barefoot, hair tied tight, wearing standard issue wraps instead of gloves. No swagger, no stare, just that same quiet composure that unsettled him in the hangar. She bowed slightly toward the ring before stepping in, her eyes never leaving the center floor. The referee raised a brow at her stillness, then looked at Harkins, who gave a half-smile that said, "Let's get this over with." The gym's only sound was the slow rip of tape tightening around her wrists, each pull deliberate, each turn of cloth whispering like a fuse being wound. No one spoke. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to wait. The fight hadn't started yet, but the entire base could already feel who owned the moment. The bell rang, a hollow metallic sound that seemed to stretch through time. Harkins stepped forward with the confidence of a man who believed experience outweighed control. His gloves rose fast, shoulders broad, voice sneering through the mouthguard. Let's see if you're as calm now, Lieutenant. Cole didn't answer. She simply exhaled once, slow, measured, and the world seemed to narrow around her. Harkins lunged first. A right hook, heavy and wide, the kind that wins in bar fights but fails in precision. Cole's body moved like water. A quarter step back, pivot on the heel, left hand sliding inside his arc. In that instant, less than a heartbeat, she struck. 1 second, an open palm drove into his sternum, collapsing his center of gravity. 2 seconds, her knee snapped up into his thigh, killing his base. 3 seconds, her forearm slammed across his shoulder, turning him off balance. For seconds, he was face down on the mat, one arm locked behind him, wrist pinned beneath the ball of her boot. No one saw it happen clearly. It was motion without aggression, just rhythm, instinct, mastery. The silence afterward was complete. Even the ventilation hum seemed to fade away. Harkins wheezed once, realizing he wasn't hurt. Not really, but that she could have made it different. Her control was deliberate, surgical. Cole crouched beside him, voice low, calm, but carrying through the gym. Never strike what you don't understand. She released the hold, stood, and gave a small, formal salute to the Master Chief. Then she stepped out of the ring, unwrapping her hands as she walked. The cloth strips trailed behind her like a discarded burden, streaked with chalk and sweat. No applause followed, just quiet. Respect. Harkins stayed kneeling, staring at the mat where her foot had been. He wasn't humiliated, he was educated. In 4 seconds, she had taught him everything his rank never did. That control isn't silence, and restraint isn't weakness. Days passed, but the echo of that 4-second lesson lingered longer than any bruise. The hangar where it happened seemed quieter now, not from fear, but from something resembling respect. Harkins went about his duties the same as before, yet everything in his rhythm had changed. The bark in his voice was gone. The swagger that once filled every corridor had softened into something almost human. He started showing up at dawn drills early, not to shout, but to help adjust the trainees' form. He began sitting with enlisted men in the mess hall, listening instead of commanding, asking questions instead of issuing orders. No one mentioned the fight. They didn't have to. The story traveled faster than any rumor, retold not as gossip, but as a lesson about power and humility. Cole never spoke of it either. Her jaw had healed, but she carried no bitterness. She knew that silence often left a stronger mark than words ever could. One morning, a sealed envelope arrived in her name, standard brown, marked from command. She opened it at her desk. The letter was short, Clinical, stripped of ceremony. Disciplinary review dropped. Conduct, exemplary. No signature beyond the initials of someone far above her pay grade. She read it once, let the words settle, and folded the paper precisely into thirds. Back in her barracks, she opened her locker. On the inside of the door, a single photograph was taped. Her old SEAL team. 6 faces grinning under Afghan sun. Dust clinging to uniforms. Eyes fierce and alive. Half of them gone now. She placed the folded letter beside the photo, smoothed the tape across the edges, and stepped back. That small square of memory, the team, the letter, the silence, told her everything she needed to know about victory. It isn't in applause or in someone else's downfall. It's in staying true when the world expects you to break. She closed the locker gently, the sound of metal latching echoing through the empty barracks. Outside, the wind howled across the base, colder, quieter, almost like respect finding its voice again. It started as a whisper. No official report, no footage, no written record, just a story that moved from one barracks to another, gathering weight each time it was told. At one base, they said she dropped him with 3 moves. At another, that she didn't even blink when he swung. The details blurred, but the truth stayed sharp. A SEAL had taken a hit from a captain and answered not with rage, but with precision. That contrast, restraint over revenge, gave the story power. It wasn't about the fight anymore. It was about the discipline behind it. Soon, recruits began using her name like a reminder. Stay calm, stay sharp, stay cool. It became the kind of phrase whispered before training ops or pinned on locker doors. Not as worship, but as a code. A way of remembering that strength isn't volume. It's control. The story of Lieutenant Cole turned into something the Navy didn't officially endorse, yet everyone understood. Every instructor who'd once yelled too loud softened their tone. Every trainee who wanted to prove their toughness learned that real toughness never needs an audience. And somewhere in the rhythm of those whispered retellings, Cole became less of a person and more of a legend, proof that silence could echo louder than violence. In war, the loud survive days. The quiet survive decades. They say power comes from rank, from stripes on your sleeve, or the tone in your voice. But the truth? Power is quieter than that. It's not in how hard you hit. It's in how steady you stay when someone else does. Control isn't the absence of anger, it's mastering it. That's what separates command from chaos. That's what makes someone worth following. If you believe strength doesn't need to shout, that respect is earned in silence, not noise. Write respect in the comments. Because that's the kind of strength this world forgets too easily. The kind that doesn't look for cameras, or applause, or recognition. The kind that just does what's right and walks away. And if you think this story ended here, it didn't. Because the next time someone underestimates a Navy SEAL, it won't end with a fight. It'll end with a lesson they'll never forget.